Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. Hey, this week I want to talk about how to connect your speaker wire to your speakers. Come right back. All right, so lately I've been spending a lot of time moving my speakers in and out, of my showroom. And in so doing, I've had to disconnect and connect speakers over and over again lately. So while I was doing that, I realized, I'm having to connect speakers differently with different connectivity because they all come from different eras and they have different types of binding posts. So I thought, well, why not talk through that a little bit and then talk a little bit about what I think is the best way to connect to each different type of binding post. So I'm going to try to bring the camera in a little closer. I don't think you can get a really good view for the most part, but I'm going to talk about it in general here and then bring the camera in. So this on my left, on your right, this is an early AR4, and they have the very early, twist on, nut type of connection here. And this is this is what a lot of very early speakers had. They a lot of times had just a flathead screw or these, type of, screw down nuts. So this is probably the most common of the very early vintage, I'd say from like early 70s, and prior. Then later, if they, manufacturers got a little more sophisticated, they started using different types of connectivity here. This is a push-in. This is a small JBL speaker. A lot of their speakers have these. And you sort of push them in and it had a spring inside which created pressure on the wire. And then lastly, probably the most common from around late 70s, forward, for, I would say, less higher end speakers are these type that have a spring-loaded little button here that you press, and then you can push the speaker wire in there, and it's sort of the spring pressure holds it similarly to this type, but this is probably more common with this push down type of a mechanism. So I'm going to go through each type and the way that I handle it, what type of connection I think is the easiest, or the different ways that you can connect them. And then, let me know your guys' thoughts and how you do things at the end of the video, of course, and in the comments. Okay, so let's talk about one of probably the most common type of connection, and for speakers that were made probably from early 1970s and back. So this is an early set of AR4s. So had the very common post and nut, that you would secure your speaker wire with. So most often you're going to take your speaker wire and you're going to, take off a good bit of the insulation. You're going to, form it into a curve a bit, and you're going to get behind the little washer there, and try to do this upside down here. But now, once you get it on, you're going to secure that and then tighten it down very snug. And that's probably how 90% of these old speakers are connected. And that's okay. It's not horrible. But over time, you might find that it becomes loose. You need to check these periodically just to make sure they don't vibrate loose over time. Just to be sure that nothing wants to come loose, and you certainly don't want those wires touching each other, when your amp is on, because obviously you get frays and things like that. So not the best way to do it. An alternative way, and what I prefer to do, if I'm going to have a long-term setup, is to find something a little more secure to attach to your wires. And these are spades here that you can get. You can certainly, this is a crimp, you can get your wire in there, crimp it down, and then that will secure in there, and you can tighten that down very snugly as well. If you can find a loop, that would be even better. You can take that off and then slip that over and then do it that way. Or if you have a soldering iron, you can actually make your own loop and then solder that, and it becomes very secure. And then that way you can just slip that over and then get your nut on there and then make it secure. And should your nut become loose, it's not going to come off and slip and the wires touch or anything like that. So for me, that's the preferred way if I'm going to make a connection type for these old speakers. That would be my preferred way of doing it. just to make sure that it stays securely connected and doesn't come loose over time. Okay, so this is a speaker from the mid-70s. This is a small JBL. And at this series, it was very popular for JBLs to have this sort of binding post. It has a spring inside, and it's very firm. You push it inside, and then if you have your angled wire here, it's fairly easy to pop that in there and then get a nice connection, and it's very secure. So on this type of JBL where it has a decent sized hole and I can put a nice gauge wire in there, I don't typically need any other type of mechanism to connect the speaker wires. Where I do have an issue is that on the occasion where the binding post that's similar to this doesn't have a wide enough hole where you can put a diced gauge wire in there. So for those situations, I use something like this where it has a nice small tip, but I can put in a larger gauge wire, and this is a crimp style, and then you would then be able to accommodate that into pretty much any of these binding posts that have a smaller hole. But the one thing I don't like about this particular style is that it's a crimp. I prefer one that has a screw in the side here that I can get a mechanical connection. So if you're going to find some of these, I would look for one with the side screw. The other thing is that this type as well, this angled type, I find much more accommodating. When the binding posts are recessed, you need to be able to get in at a bit of an angle and get it down in there. They do sell ones that are straight, but when it's recessed like this, you just can't get the straight pin in there inside the recess to attach. So I just don't, I'm sure there are some that work well, that need, that can accommodate straight. But in most cases, I just find the ones that are angled to be a little more accommodating. Now, the other type of connector that I like is this type this one happens to be from Monster, but it has a similar, a type of a speaker wire tip. It's a woven wire here. What I like about this is that you don't need any other tools to connect the speaker wire to them. It's two parts. You undo this, you slide your speaker wire through this, then you take the open-ended wires and wrap them around this crown, if you will, on the top, and then you screw it back together, and that creates a firm binding to the wire without needing any other tools. And so from there, it's really just like connecting another speaker wire. You would just put it in there just like normal, and put it down in there, and you're good to go. The only thing negative about these is that if you use them, attach them and detach them quite often, this little speaker, this little wire here does get frayed over time, and so eventually that will break. You could apply some solder and sort of resolder it. It will then, that area would lose its flexibility. But pretty much, you still have, very similar type of connection. But I find these to be very useful as well. I do like these quite a bit. Okay, so this is the last style of binding post. And this is, of course, an upgraded set that's on a pair of Fraser speakers, but this is not the original, type of binding post that came on here. I upgraded these. So this is called a 5-way binding post. So this is what a set, one side of it looks like before it's installed. But essentially, you have multiple ways of attaching your wire. You can unscrew it, and there's a hole here inside the post. You can stick your wire in there and then cinch it down. You could wrap your wire around it and then cinch it down. But that's not how most of the time people will attach their speaker wires to this. What they would typically do is then take a male end plug like this. This is one that's very common. You can attach your speaker wires here and then just simply slide it into the end of the binding post, and it creates a very secure connection. Now that's a single, but in most cases the reason you want to put these in there is to use this type, which is called the banana post. And I like these. They're just so easy to use. Once you attach your speaker wires here, you simply go up and then slide it in, and there you go. Very secure. What I really like most about them is, in some case, some situation, it's an accident, someone comes and trips over your speaker wire, rips it out. There's no way that the two wires are going to connect. So these are secured into this casing here, and there's simply no way. I mean, in the very, very unusual situation, if it, touched a piece of metal and shorted out, I guess. But other than that, it's pretty impossible for anything to short out. Now, obviously, if you're going to, change your speakers and disconnect things, you would want to turn your amp off. But, this is just sort of risk, reduced risk of any situation that might come up where, your speaker wires could touch. And so this is about the easiest way to connect and disconnect speakers. If you're going to upgrade, then of course, they would have to be the right distance apart. So on this particular set, I did have to widen the holes just a little bit, but they were fairly, close. On the earlier set of speakers I showed you, the binding posts were much too far apart. So in that case, you would just mount one, on each side, and then you use something like this, which is a single, for each side, and then, it would accommodate that. You just wouldn't be able to use the banana post. But these work, extremely well. I recommend them if you have a situation where you've got a set of speakers and you're restoring them anyway. If you're going to recap them and and really go through them, I would suggest go ahead and if they can accommodate it, go ahead and accommodate some better binding posts. I don't see any reason why not. In this one, the only thing about it is that the binding posts do protrude a little bit beyond the case of the cabinet here, even though this is recessed. That's about it. It's a small accommodation. You just have to be a little more careful when you're moving these. It's not flush with the cabinet. But other than that, it is so much easier to connect and disconnect and have a much better connection to your speaker with this type of binding post. So I would recommend using them. You can get little sets like this that can be installed here. They are the right spacing for banana connectors, and you're good to go. So that's the different types of binding posts and some examples of different connectors put your speaker wire on there. And so hope you found that kind of useful. Well, there you have it. Now you get to see what I go through when I'm swapping in all these speakers. Not just physically moving them, but then going through the connectivity for each one of them. So, hope you found that somewhat beneficial, maybe a little interesting. I won't do all of them, I won't upgrade all of them like this set with the new binding posts, but, occasionally if a set looks like it'll accommodate it very well, I'll certainly do that. The ones on this little JBL, for example, I think they work fine. Won't be something I upgrade. They're very well built and durable, so I don't think I would be upgrading these. And it also, by the way, in this case, it's sort of JBL-ish. So, I wouldn't want to change the aesthetic for a speaker like this one, but for this speaker, I didn't think it mattered, and I thought it was an absolute upgrade for them. So I hope you found that beneficial. If you guys, have some comments, please put those down there, and certainly love to read them. If you don't want to miss out on future videos, hit subscribe, and as always, thank you guys for tuning in.